Thanks for tuning into the Upstream Life Podcast. Join us as we dive into Scripture and tell real-life stories that we hope will educate, equip, inspire, and challenge you to live a life against the flow.
In this episode of the podcast, Sammy and Joe sit down to give a life update, talk about what's been going on, how the Lord's been speaking to them, and where He's leading them next. This is the second part of a longer conversation, so jump back to last week if you missed it. We hope you are encouraged and inspired to live a life against the flow.
So I started saying something earlier and then I never brought it full circle, but you gave me an open door to do that. So exactly what I was saying earlier, just because of the way that our kids have been raised and the things that they've seen, sometimes they use that against us in a good way.
Yeah.
And one of those is, like you just said, one of our kids recently had said to me when we had talked about, selling the house, getting a piece of land and having some, dreams that we've had for years of what to do with that land. Just in talking with her, she's like, so in what way are you going to be living differently than you are here?
Yeah.
Because then it doesn't matter. Then just stay where you are.
Yeah, if we're just going to take this home and put it on a piece of land, then that's what everybody's dream is. Everybody's American dream.
Mine too. If we're being honest with ourselves, like who wouldn't want?
I think that's something that you and I have to really guard ourselves against, because I don't think that's why God would open these doors and have us go through this is to just transplant suburban problems in rural settings.
Right. For sure.
Yeah.
And I can't afford to have this house and animals. So, something's got to give. But the other thing too, is I just remember you had said, like, you were sharing a story in talking with our oldest boy who's going off to college soon, and just his encouragement to you and how to continue to raise his siblings.
Yeah.
And to continue to give them, experiences that will help shape them. And I know Ayana and Callista have shared, and Dorian, I would say, is kind of part of that crowd too, but Ayana and Callista would have the most memories of, like, us being at Crossfire, and just being raised in an environment where you're constantly with people and serving people. And then obviously they all have memories of just being in Haiti, and your entire life is focused on, your family and ministry. And I'm thankful that that's made, obviously it's made some wounds and scars for all of us, kids included, but it's also created some really beautiful things in them. And so it's just encouraging for me to even hear him say, hey, like, don't neglect that. Make sure that, the younger kids also experience those things. And I think that was one of our fears, is if we just keep living the exact same way that we are currently, it's not going to allow us to be able to do some of the things that we want to do, and feel like God's leading us to do, and have our kids be a part of those experiences. And, when you were saying, or maybe it was me, or maybe it was both of us, like, coming home from Haiti, like, we were really wounded. And it was, the last couple of years have been a lot of healing and a lot of just kind of recalibrating and trying to get the vertigo going on in your brain to just stop. And we're in such a good spot now that it's like, okay, like, we're ready to rumble again, And I had
that guy speak that word over me not too long ago too. It's just super powerful.
What was that?
Just, saying, like, hey, the spiritual keys of authority, God He's ready to give them back. You, like, go and keep doing, what you're doing, who you are. And it's just, I would be embarrassed of myself if my last years of life were just talking. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there are surely enough voices in 2022. Yeah. I mean, sometimes I think, why our voice too?
It was one of the my buddy Eric Tam, he many years ago, remember when we brought him a Hannah Montana balloon? We were just getting ready to meet.
Do you remember? That was a long time ago.
Met him at the Rochester Mall.
That was a long time ago.
Anyways, during that season, there was a fleshly pursuit for wanting to be a big speaker. And I remember him and Bob Lenz both just saying, like, the world doesn't need more talking heads. And that was a really big shift for me, where I was like, yeah, let's be the doers. Like, not just because it sounded fun. Like, it seemed like that's where God met us best. Yeah. Was in those favorable times where we took, those faith steps.
But even in that, it's like such that caution, like from the sermon this morning, is it's like, man, like, I don't want somebody to look at me and think, oh, wow, like, they're really great at being great at causes.
Causes, yeah, but not, exactly. Yeah.
And there's a balance, because, like, we our given mandates, like
Mm-hmm.
for sure, without a doubt, like we are responsible to care for the poor. We are responsible to care for the orphan and to care for the widow. Like there are, and to love our neighbors. Like there are things that are very crystal clear and you can't neglect those.
Yeah.
But if those ever supersede Christ, well, that's
Yeah, that goes back to, keep dropping names here, but
don't drop any more names.
No, Ashley Kirshner, remember what he said?
What did he say?
He said, I love worship and I have to always protect myself because worshiping
don't wanna worship
is an idol. I need to remember
Yeah.
that I worship.
And that's the thing,
I worship for Christ. Like
yeah.
Christ is who I worship.
Yeah.
Not worshiping worship.
Yeah. Well, and I think, the way that we live in this country, like it's pretty easy to make everything into an idol, really.
Yeah.
You got to be careful. You got to be careful.
So do we want to talk a little bit about what we're even talking about?
What are we talking about?
Well, we're talking about the chaotic season that we're in, and we're talking about all the around it, but what are we actually doing? Like what's happening right now in the Upstream Life Rogalski household?
What's happening is in like 3 weeks, we have to be out of our house.
Yeah.
And hopefully we'll be on land.
But without a home on land.
Right.
Yeah.
So we have some things that we're really kind of trying to press in and figure out. And
with 3 dogs, 5 kids.
6 until Dorian goes to college.
Dorian leaves for college.
Yeah, we have a lot going on and we work from home. So that's tricky. The thing that's crazy is that it still feels peace. Yes, is a little overwhelming for sure. Am I a little grumpy sometimes? 100%. Am I teary sometimes?
Yeah.
Without a doubt. But it still feels like the right thing for us to be doing. And so, when you were saying earlier, like we came back to the States and just really needed a time to heal. And, some friends gave us that opportunity and just gave us a place to come and rest and restore and rejuvenate and just take care of our family and ourselves and save up for the next step and just really like provided for us in ways that I feel forever indebted to, not because they in any way make us feel that way, but because it just was it was such a blessing. And long before that happened, the first time we had to leave the island, somebody else provided us respite in their home. A complete stranger took us in, had our kids in their RV and some of our kids in their house, and really gave us
their golf cart.
Gave us our golf cart to go across the street and hang out in the ocean. I mean, we have been given respite time and time again. We've always had people that have been willing to take us in and love us well. And so for years, years and years, we've talked about this idea of like really wanting to have a place where we can provide that for other people that are just like, neck deep in ministry. And, when you're neck deep in ministry, it can be a really isolating place. It can be a place where you're not really safe to screw up. You're not really safe to wrestle in your own faith. You're not really safe to be anything other than what people expect of you, the Instagram version of you. And it's such our heart, especially mine. I don't want to speak for you, but it's definitely
you can speak for me on this topic.
Yeah, it's definitely my heart to provide that for other people. And I know that, our home here, like only to a certain extent, can we really do that? We can always open up our home and move kids around and pack people in bedrooms. But I don't know how restful our home is being surrounded by 1,000 other ones.
Yeah.
So the fact that we have this land that, God brought into our path, and the hope would be that we would have some places where people can just get away and just reconnect with him and laugh and cry and scream and, even swear if they need to.
I don't know about that. Okay, maybe.
Come on. We just have been given that so many times, and I want to be able to give that back. And the scary part about that is that land is not cheap.
Yeah.
Around here, and
nor our houses these days.
And we, because of the market situation, like, we would never be able to get back into this house once selling it. And that's fine. But it also means that whatever we live in the future is going to be a downsize, which is also fine.
Yeah.
But it also leaves us with a lot of unanswered questions, which which is a little, I mean, it is scary.
It is. But that's when we go back
and
to
some
being
people might even say it's
yeah.
irresponsible, and
Well, anybody
understand.
that wants to say it's irresponsible can just, I mean, they can keep that and own that, but then they probably shouldn't be tuning into this channel anyways, because
Right. They probably already don't like us.
Upstream life, this goes back to the things
Sometimes
we're saying
on paper
earlier.
it's messy. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where it goes back to the beginning. To be a practitioner, to be an example of somebody that's going to teach what upstream life looks like, these are just, it's like having your teacher teach you forever and then actually take you out and show you some things. Like this could take a shift for us to be more like OJT, a little on the job training of what taking steps of faith look like. And people have to remember that true steps of faith, for them to be steps of faith,
You don't have all the answers.
they
Yeah.
have to be
Yeah.
without the answers.
Yeah.
That's like saying God is certain and being stressed out by uncertainty and needing to force certain. I know that sounds like a
Yeah, and
circular
I mean,
thing,
it does.
but
It just goes against, I
Yeah.
think, a lot of the questions that I've gotten are, what about this? And what about that? And what about
Yeah.
this? And sometimes I ask myself those, what about this? What about this? Like
There
I
are-
do.
yeah.
I'm prone to that, but
the
it's
what ifs.
also,
Yeah.
it's also really encouraging because I do have a few people in my life that are like, well, those what ifs actually don't matter in the grand
Well, it's
scheme
not
of
even that, but
things.
those are the what ifs that keep us from doing anything that looks like what the Spirit seems to convict us of when we read Scripture. This all started, this whole message that we're freestyling here started with Scripture being a mirror. Like this morning's message, what brought tears to your eyes is the fact that when you hold Scripture up and you compare your life to it as a mirror, sometimes it feels very different. So when it requires taking steps towards that identity, towards what seems right from Scripture, it's not going to make sense to the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Like that is its
and
point.
it might not make sense to other Christians. And that's the
but
way it
the other
is
part
too.
that people have to realize is that in order for it to be a following of God, it can't have your expectation in it.
Yeah, that's the tricky
Like,
part.
can you imagine all of the heroes of faith that we read about that were inspired by if they were only pursuing what they dreamed in the beginning anyways? Like it all looks different than what they could imagine. I mean,
Yeah.
Stephen is one of the most inspirational first martyrs ever. And if you spend time just reading about him and understanding those moments before his life was lost, you realize the type of fuel it took to get a faith that's as strong as it is 2,000 years later.
Yeah.
I was able to say it right along with Kevin this morning when he talked about, because I thought it was odd that he said, 67% of Americans today find themselves connected to some sort of Christianity. I remember studying that just 20 years ago and it being high 80s.
Mm-hmm.
So that means in my lifetime, 20%.
Not even in your lifetime, in half your lifetime.
Yeah, in 20 years, 20% of the population has diminished. And having been part of youth ministry forever, I know that for those leaving the church at 18 years of age, the numbers are staggering how many people go away from the church. Well, we used to do polling questions in youth ministry of why. And it's because there just aren't that many examples of the faith today. Kids can't pull out role models of the faith. They can pull out role models of America. They can pull out role models of culture and finance and all kinds of different things, good people, whatever. But when you ask youth today to find people in their 1,000, 2,000, 10,000 person churches that are a representation of the scriptures you read, it's hard. And that's what the Upstream life is meant to encourage people, is to say, guess what? If you feel that itch, that
Pull,
burden, that pull, that void, even after Christ is still there, push into it. And what you might find is that it may have you living a more radical. I've never loved that.
Because it doesn't really seem radical.
No, it doesn't. It feels right.
Yeah. And I do think that obviously like your life experiences so much so shape.
Yeah.
They so much shape your perspectives. And I think that I don't blame people that haven't seen the things that we've seen.
Yeah.
For not understanding certain things that we understand based on that, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think everybody is called to live the exact same way.
Yeah,
I mean,
other people's steps are going to seem smaller. Not smaller,
them,
meaning
maybe.
less than.
To them,
not
maybe.
less than. But
Yeah.
this for us is not like oh my gosh, I can't believe. This is kind of just in rhythm of our life
Yeah.
since the beginning.
But quite honestly, this is the scariest one for me.
Well, that's,
You
yeah,
know,
that's because
by a
yeah.
landslide. I mean, we have done some
Yeah.
crazy things, but this one to me, I think it's because there is not a,
we have no control in this one.
and there's not really a fallback plan.
Yeah, no.
There's
yeah.
no like house to return to. There's no,
You and I connected a couple weeks ago, and the one thing we could agree on is that we both were scared to death.
yeah.
We
Yeah.
felt peace, but we both were extremely fearful, anxious, and everything else. And when I press into that, the biggest reason why is
It really has nothing to do with anything that actually matters.
no, it has nothing to do with anything that matters, but it has everything to do with the things of the what ifs
Mm-hmm.
that we think matter.
Right. Because we even like go through this list of like, okay, these are the things that are going to look different. Well, are we going to film our podcast? Well, who cares? Like you don't need a room with 2 chairs and 2 mics. It just might be
2 lawn chairs.
Exactly. 2 lawn chairs and a palm tree.
Ben will be driven crazy by the birds and the wind and stuff in the background.
Right. But it's like, you know what I mean? Like it's just silly.
It's a more fitting
those are the
context.
things that we worry about. Where will the kids film their videos? Where will, we do this? Where will we do that? Where will we eat? What will we wear? Where will we, and obviously there are practical things you have.
Yeah.
You need to know where you're going to do your laundry.
You
but
don't
it's
want to
so
make
funny.
fun. You don't want to make fun of those because they're really reasonable.
Yeah, they're really reasonable.
But-
But it's funny that our minds like, okay, so the other day I started following this girl that one of my friends told me about that they live kind of off grid in the desert. And I was looking at her posts and on her story on Instagram showed up laundry day.
Mm-hmm.
Sure enough, she's drying her laundry on clotheslines.
Yeah,
And
like
I had
grandma
this
used to.
epiphany like, oh, I know how to do that.
Yeah.
We literally lived in Haiti for 2 years.
My grandmother,
But,
my entire
babe,
life,
but it
hung all of her
never
clothes out,
crossed
even in the
my
winter.
mind. Babe, it never crossed my mind. In these weeks leading
Yeah.
up to the move, I'm like, where am I going to do laundry? I'm going to have to make a laundry room somewhere in like a shed, or I'm going to go to my friend's house. Never did it dawn on me until I saw it on somebody else's Instagram. Like, I've literally lived this. I know how to hang laundry up.
Yeah.
I know how to, I've seen it done a million times at least.
Yeah.
And I've done it myself, wash laundry by hand. Not that that's what I want to do,
Yeah, and then
but it's like, it's
whether
just
you- yeah.
interesting. The
And
things
it might be
that
the
we,
gap, right? Yeah.
yeah, it's just interesting the things that we think we really need.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, what we want to remind each other of, at least, and our kids of, is like, we need Jesus,
Yeah.
we need each other, and we need some, basic shelter
And
and
I think we-
food and
And in-
water.
in that, I think the spiritual thing that we need the most is trust again. When you go through a season where you just got your butt kicked, it's easy to lose trust in God.
Yeah.
Now, I know
Yeah.
that's not true from a scriptural standpoint,
But it's true in a
but is-
living it out
in a real
standpoint.
life standpoint,
Yeah.
it is. And
Because of expectations, really, for me.
The other day, I was sitting on a pier in the Gulf of Mexico watching all these beautiful birds, dolphins, sea turtles, clouds moving. And I just thought about the fact that how weird would it be if their voices were all just panicked and anxious
Right?
about like,
Where are we going to film our podcast?
where are we going to eat? Where, like all this, like life just happens.
Mhm.
And if you aren't resilient enough to be thrown into awkward situations and know how to, because that becomes a thing, is it's like the mind wants to run to like, we're all going to die.
Yeah,
Like-
we're all going to die. We're going to sweat to death and die of hype.
Yeah.
What is the one where you're hot to death, not cold to
Like
death?
heat stroke or something. Yeah.
No, what is
Hypothermia.
hypothermia? Hyper?
Maybe, yeah.
Hypo?
But either way, like
Hyperthermia?
the reality of it is we're probably going to be extremely uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But do you know what uncomfortable does? What it actually produces? Like, if
Well,
you think
it
about
produces
fruit,
either anger
yeah.
and frustration and swearing and crying,
Yeah, but it's
or
not- yeah.
or
Yeah.
it pushes you closer to Jesus
well,
and
it
your
does.
family. When I think honestly, like I think the reason that we have such a close family,
Yeah.
and the reason that our family is just the way that it is because we've been in some difficult situations together. And
Yeah.
what's funny is like I was thinking,
I mean, I think about what our 2 oldest daughters have had to do in being close to each other. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, right. Oh gosh, don't even go there. But I was thinking the other day about like just all the stuff happening and like, oh, we could be homeless. you know, whatever. At least we have a car. But
If Grandpa Tom could figure it out, we can figure it out.
Well, actually, what I was thinking about was like, what is our, like, the favorite show in the house is Survivor, right? And I'm like, we glorify that, right? Like Survivor is like, wow, that's like the coolest. Like you're going to, it's a cool thing to do, to be on Survivor.
42 days.
So that everybody can watch you, build your shelter and find your food and basically starve and do your challenges, all those things. It is cool when it's a TV show.
Yeah.
When you're doing it in real life, because you really feel like God is asking you to take a step.
Yeah. Because
he's got something else for you and for other people because of what he's got for you. Then all of a sudden it's like crazy and stupid.
Yeah.
You know, it's just so interesting. And yeah, maybe on paper it probably is crazy. It probably is a little stupid, but I do believe. I do believe. Yeah, I mean, I would look at us and be like, they're a little insane. It's fine. But like the reality is I think it's gonna be really beautiful.
I think
it's gonna be really hard.
What you're measuring,
I'm not idealistic.
If your measuring stick is the things that really matter,
right?
It can only
Jesus and family.
it can only produce good things as an outcome. So I think we should probably
it's gonna be interesting.
Wrap it up.
So maybe we'll have people vote.
To be continue.
Like, do we keep going with the Upstream life? What would we call it? Like the
series?
The series of Rogalski homelessness potentially.
Oh yeah.
I don't believe that that's actually true, but maybe have people vote like, should we stick with this or should we go into what we already planned?
Well, let's tell anybody that does watch or listen know this for sure.
It could be interesting.
In the very near future, settings and backgrounds and all that type of stuff are going to change. We can still do our topics and stuff like that in a lot of different settings, but I think what they're going to hear is a lot more of not past stories. That's the thing that I get most excited about. I don't like.
I want to read that. Do you think our kid would care?
No,
I won't name any names. Okay, I'm gonna read that.
Yeah, because there's nothing worse than has-been stories. Like I don't want to be the guy that sits around and talks about the touchdown pass my senior year, and that's the highlight of my life. I want to keep writing the story so that our grandkids.
Okay, so I'm not going to read the whole thing because I don't have permission, but
set it up a little bit.
So in our family Devo, like group chat, you had posted a Devo and then somebody had a response to it. Yeah. And in it they said, they were quoting themselves and saying that they had a conversation with somebody and said, isn't it weird when your testimony isn't your testimony anymore? And what I mean by this is in my past, the story that I would have told people was this, and this, but I'm not in my past. I'm in my present. And like, what is my present testimony? Like, what am I currently like living out? Yeah. And it says, all of those things in the past, we learn from those things. They grow us, but we can't live off of yesterday's faith forever. Sometimes it's easy to live off of 5 years ago faith and 2 years ago missions trips. All of those things we learn from, they grow us, but we can't live off of yesterday's faith forever. Yeah. Eventually, we need to keep writing our testimony and searching for God in the present and the past. Yeah. How can we serve God, keep serving him in the present, And I love that. And that's, again, another thing, like when I was saying earlier, like I just love our kids so much. And I think if we
owe it to them, we owe it to the generations, we owe it to, like I said, grandkids. I don't want all of our identity to be past tense.
For sure. But there is a season, and that's the thing, is there's a season for everything, right?
I mean, this was
we needed it. We really desperately needed a time of rest and healing and
but like Uncle Joe,
we're ready to rumble.
What were the other grandparents in the bed of Willy Wonka's?
I don't know, Grandpa Joe
and those guys. I don't want my rest to, start and end in a bed, because who knows how many days we have left. And I don't have any regrets. And this isn't a regret message, but it is like, it just feels like it's the time in the season to get
we don't want to have regrets. We don't want to have regrets.
To get back on the horse and see what God has.
Yeah. I mean, it's probably going to be a little crazy, but
crazy we're used to though.
Crazy, I feel like the right kind of crazy.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Pursuit of Christ crazy.
Yeah.
Not crazy.
Okay,
just
yeah,
for
I
the
want to
savor.
read that quote from Kevin one more time because I just think it's
What I
like
loved about that message
so
that you
good.
just pulled up was, I think she even quoted, give us this day our daily bread, and the
Yes.
importance of needing fresh bread every day, not living off yesterday's bread or asking for more bread to save for tomorrow, that each day is a pursuit, whatever. More.
Okay.
Yeah.
You ready?
Kevin's.
Okay, so we are religious but not righteous when we promote cause without Christ. And I feel like even in this, like this is a big step. It's a big, what we could call it a cause. Like we're doing this because, we feel like this is what God's leading us to do. But if we're doing it without Christ, then it means nothing.
Yeah. So let's make this statement right now that in this pursuit, we are promoting knowing Christ and continuing to follow Christ more.
And what he's leading
What
you
cause
to.
comes out of it?
Exactly.
Is to be seen.
Exactly. And it's not going to be the same for everyone.
Exactly.
Because if everybody moved to the country and did what we feel like God's leading us to do, there would be some pretty big gaps in the kingdom, right? So it's not going to be the same for everyone. But what is going to be the same for everyone is that Christ needs to be preeminent, and we need to be making sure that we are
it's not the what,
with
it's the
him
why.
before. Exactly.
It's not the what, it's the why.
And if
why
we're
is
really open to what he
to
has
follow,
for us, I
yep.
mean, did we ever, 22 years ago, did you ever think that we would have 8 kids and 2 son-in-laws? Never.
No, fully submitted and surrendered to Christ. There's not a single thing that at 20 years of age, I would have predicted or pursued. Like it all has come.
Did you ever think that we would have lived in Haiti?
Him. No, none of it.
Did you ever think that we would live in Texas?
2009.
You're supposed to just say yes or no.
2009,
I have a point.
2009, I was the loudest voice behind why go overseas when there's all this stuff right in our own backyard.
Right.
And then 2010, everything changed.
My point is,
Just no.
We would not have expected most of the things that we have been. Would you have ever expected that we would adopt 2 kids from China?
Nope.
Would you ever expect one of them would get famous?
Nope.
No, exactly. Like our life and the things that we've seen and done and that God's done in us and through us, we would have never expected. And our journey is not going to look like anyone else's.
Yeah,
the
and I would
important
hope
part,
that it would point people back to Christ.
Right. The important part is that we're all doing what we feel like we're led to do.
Yeah.
I guess this is what we feel like we're being led to do.